Good day everyone, I am Danilo N. Dividina, your reporter this afternoon in ED 160 class. This is Class ED 160, Educational Assessment Cognate, Section 3982 under Mario F. Aleon, Ph.D. Today we will discuss about 21st century assessment. The report is divided into three parts, namely 1. Characteristics of the 21st century assessment. 2. Instructional decision in assessment, before starting teaching, during teaching, and after teaching. 3. Assessment in classroom instruction and the types of educational decision. The first part was already reported by my co-reporter Reverend Eric Basilio Suarez. Let us proceed to the topics. I have divided my assigned topics into 5 parts. Let's begin with Lesson 1 entitled Characteristics. Characteristics of the 21st century assessment. Classroom assessment is a joint process that involves both teachers and learners. It is an integral part of teaching and learning. Teachers provide appropriate assessment when they aim to holistically measure learners' current and developing abilities while enabling them to take responsibility in the process. This view recognizes the diversity of learners inside the classroom, the need for multiple ways of measuring their varying abilities and learning potentials, and the role of learners as co-participants in the assessment process. At the heart of this assessment framework is the recognition and deliberate consideration of the learner's zone of proximal development. Appropriate assessment is committed to ensure learners' success in moving from guided to independent display of knowledge, understanding, and skills, and to enable them to transfer this successfully in future situations. From this point of view, assessment facilitates the development of learners' higher-order thinking and 21st century skills. The following 8 characteristics of 21st century assessment are essential guide for preparation of assessment activities by educators. It is necessary to refer to these characteristics to ensure that the learners are being assessed towards the skills and demand of the 21st century. Number 1. Responsive. Visible performance-based work, as a result of assessment, generates data that inform curriculum and instruction. For example, I discussed about literature and literary works in my Literature 11 class using the formative assessment. In a 1/4 sheet of paper, the students will answer the question, how does literature mirrors your life? And what literary work that mirrors your life? Number 2. Flexible. Assessment need to be adaptable to student settings. Rather than the identical approach that works in traditional assessment, 21st century approaches are more versatile. For example, in my Principles of Teaching 1 class, I let my students have a survey on their multiple intelligences. After that, I grouped my students according to their intelligences and let them have a creative presentation. Number 3. Integrated. Assessments are to be incorporated into day-to-day practice rather than add-ons at the end of instructions or during a single specified week of the school calendar. For example, I assess my students from time to time because assessments are not just given at the end. I give my students formative assessments rather than just giving them summative assessments. Number 4. Informative. The desired 21st century goals and objectives are clearly stated and explicitly taught. Students display their range of emerging knowledge and skills. Exemplars routinely guide students toward achievement of targets. For example, before I start my class, I see to it that my students are aware of the goals and objectives. With that, my students will be guided with their achievements. Number 5. Multiple methods. An assessment continuum that includes a spectrum of strategies is a norm. For example, My students have different intelligences, so I see to it that I don't focus on only one way of assessing their learnings. Number 6. Communicated. Communication of assessment data is clear and transparent for all stakeholders. For example, I let my students keep track of their progress by returning their papers or evaluation sheet. I also see to it that I submit my students' grade on time for their parents to be aware of their child's achievements. Number 7. Technically sound. Adjustments and accommodations are made in the assessment process to meet the student's needs and fairness. For example, I make sure that my assessments are valid, reliable, and supports comparisons since my students have different intelligences, beliefs, gender and socio-economic groups. Number 8. Systemic. 21st century assessment is part of a comprehensive and well-aligned assessment system that is balanced and inclusive of all students, constituents, and stakeholders and designed to support improvement at all levels. For example, changes are inevitable, so I make sure that I am able to identify the needs of my students and the community. With that, I will be able to develop my students into globally competitive individuals. Having discussed the 8 characteristics of the 21st century assessment, we will now apply it. Would you like to take the quiz? Question number 1. Assessment need to be adaptable to student settings. Choose the answer from among the 8 characteristics of the 21st century assessment. Is it responsive? Flexible? Integrated? Informative? Multiple methods? Communicated? Technically sound? Or systemic? The correct answer is flexible. The keyword is adaptable. Question number 2. Assessment should also be fair to ethnic, gender, and socio-economic groups. Is it responsive? Flexible? Integrated? Informative? Multiple methods? Communicated? Technically sound? Or systemic? The correct answer is technically sound. The keyword is fair. Question number 3. Students, as well as their parents, keep track of their achievements. What is the correct answer? The correct answer is communicated. The keyword is keep tracked. The parents are informed of their students' achievement. Question number 4. Teacher Amy uses different strategies and techniques in assessing her students. What is the correct answer? The correct answer is multiple methods. The keyword here are different strategies and techniques. Question number 5. After every discussion, Mr. Dela Cruz let his students answer a checkup quiz. What is the correct answer? The correct answer is integrated. In integrated, the assessments are to be incorporated into day-to-day practice. Question number 6. Ms. Aquino asks her students to give their insights for the day's lesson. What is the correct answer? The correct answer is responsive. The keyword is insight. The student's insight is one way of generating idea. Question number 7. 21st century assessment is balanced and inclusive of all students, constituents, and stakeholders. What is the correct answer? The correct answer is systemic. Question number 8. Ms. Grace always shares the objectives to her students before the start of the lesson proper. What is the correct answer? The correct answer is informative. The keyword is share. Question number 9. Assessment data is clear and transparent for all stakeholders. What is the correct answer? The correct answer is communicated. The keywords are clear and transparent. Question number 10. Ms. Stacy asked her students for a 1/8 sheet of paper. There, she wrote their grades for prelim. What is the correct answer? The correct answer is communicated. The keywords are wrote their grades. This is part of being clear and transparent. Let us proceed to the second part of my report pertaining to classroom assessment and its two types, formative and summative. Classroom assessment is an ongoing process of identifying, gathering, organizing, and interpreting quantitative and qualitative information about what learners know and can do. Teachers should employ classroom assessment methods that are consistent with curriculum standards. It is important for teachers to always inform learners about the objectives of the lesson so that the latter will aim to meet or even exceed the standards. The teacher provides immediate feedback to students about their learning process. Classroom assessment also measures the achievement of competencies by the learners. Formative assessment, or otherwise known as assessment for learning. Assessment for learning is ongoing assessment that allows teachers to monitor students on a day-to-day basis and modify their teaching based on what the students need to be successful. This assessment provides students with the timely, specific feedback that they need to make adjustments to their learning. After teaching a lesson, we need to determine whether the lesson was accessible to all students while still challenging to the more capable, what the students learned and still need to know, how we can improve the lesson to make it more effective, and, if necessary, what other lesson we might offer as a better alternative. This continual evaluation of instructional choices is at the heart of improving our teaching practice. Summative assessment, or otherwise known as assessment of learning. Assessment of learning is the snapshot in time that lets the teacher, students, and their parents know how well each student has completed the learning tasks and activities. It provides information about student achievement. While it provides useful reporting information, it often has little effect on learning. Summative assessment measures whether learners have met the content and performance standards. Teachers must use methods to measure student learning that have been deliberately designed to assess how well students have learned and are able to apply their learning in different contexts. The results of summative assessments are recorded and used to report on the learner's achievement. Primarily, the results of summative assessment are reported to the learners and their parents/guardians. In addition, these are reported to principals/school heads, teachers who will receive the child in the next grade level, and guidance teachers who should help students cope with challenges they experience in school. We now proceed to our third lesson. What is assessed in the classroom? Assessment in the classroom is aimed at helping students perform well in relation to the learning standards. Learning standards comprise content standards, performance standards, and learning competencies that are outlined in the curriculum. Content standards. Content standards identify and set the essential knowledge and understanding that should be learned. They cover a specified scope of sequential topics within each learning strand, domain, theme, or component. Content standards answer the question, what should the learners know? Performance standards. Performance standards describe the abilities and skills that learners are expected to demonstrate in relation to the content standards and integration of 21st century skills. The integration of knowledge, understanding, and skills is expressed through creation, innovation, and adding value to products/performance during independent work or in collaboration with others. Performance standards answer the following questions. What can learners do with what they know? How well must learners do their work? How well do learners use their learning or understanding in different situations? How do learners apply their learning or understanding in real-life contexts? What tools and measures should learners use to demonstrate what they know? Learning competencies. Learning competencies refer to the knowledge, understanding, skills, and attitudes that students need to demonstrate in every lesson or learning activity. Concept development. The learning standards in the curriculum reflect progressions of concept development. The cognitive process dimensions adapted from Anderson and Krathwohl, 2001, may be a good way to operationalize these progressions. It provides a scheme for classifying educational goals, objectives, and standards. It also defines a broad range of cognitive processes from basic to complex, as follows: remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating. Adapted cognitive process dimensions. Remembering. The learner can recall information and retrieve relevant knowledge from long-term memory, identify, retrieve, recognize, duplicate, list, memorize, repeat, reproduce. Understanding. The learner can construct meaning from oral, written, and graphic messages, interpret, exemplify, classify, summarize, infer, compare, explain, paraphrase, discuss. Applying. The learner can use the information to undertake a procedure in familiar situations or in a new way, execute, implement, demonstrate, dramatize, interpret, solve, use, illustrate, convert, discover. Analyzing. The learner can distinguish between parts and determine how they relate to one another, and to the overall structure and purpose, differentiate, distinguish, compare, contrast, organize, outline, attribute, deconstruct. Evaluating. The learner can make judgments and justify decisions, coordinate, measure, detect, defend, judge, argue, debate, critique, appraise, evaluate. Creating. The learner can put elements together to form a functional whole, create a new product or point of view, generate, hypothesize, plan, design, develop, produce, construct, formulate, assemble, design, devise. Now let us proceed to the fourth lesson. How are learners assessed in the classroom? Learners are assessed in the classroom through various processes and measures appropriate to and congruent with learning competencies defined in the K-12 curriculum. Some of these processes and measures may be used for both formative and summative assessment, which have different goals. Learners may be assessed individually or collaboratively. Individual and collaborative formative assessment. Individual formative assessment enables the learner to demonstrate independently what has been learned or mastered through a range of activities such as check-up quizzes, written exercises, performances, models, and even electronic presentations. Collaborative formative assessment, peer assessment, allows students to support each other's learning. Discussions, role-playing, games, and other group activities may also be used as performance-based formative assessment wherein learners support and extend each other's learning. Instructional decision. Instructional decision has three parts. Before the lesson. Formative assessment conducted before the lesson informs the teacher about the student's understanding of a lesson/topic before direct instruction. It helps teachers understand where the students stand in terms of conceptual understanding and application. Formative assessment provides bases for making instructional decisions, such as moving on to a new lesson or clarifying prerequisite understanding. During the lesson proper. Formative assessment conducted during the lesson proper informs teachers of the progress of the students in relation to the development of the learning competencies. It also helps the teacher determine whether instructional strategies are effective. The results of formative assessment given at this time may be compared with the results of formative assessment given before the lesson to establish if conceptual understanding and application have improved. On this basis, the teacher can make decisions on whether to review, reteach, remediate, or enrich lessons and, subsequently, when to move on to the next lesson. After the lesson. Formative assessment conducted after the lesson assesses whether learning objectives were achieved. It also allows the teacher to evaluate the effectiveness of instruction. Students who require remediation and/or enrichment should be helped by the teacher using appropriate teaching strategies. The following are purposes of formative assessment. Before the lesson, during the lesson proper and after the lesson. These are the components of summative assessment with purpose and when given. We proceed to our fifth and final lesson. Comparison between formative and summative assessment. In formative assessment, checks learning to determine what to do next and then provide suggestions of what to do. Teaching and learning are indistinguishable from assessment, while in summative assessment, checks what has been learned to date. Formative assessment is designed to assist educators and students in improving learning, while summative assessment is designed for the information of those not directly involved in daily learning and teaching in addition to educators and students. Formative assessment is used continually by providing descriptive feedback, while summative assessment is presented in a periodic report. Formative assessment usually uses detailed, specific and descriptive feedback in a formal or informal report, while summative assessment usually compiles data into a single number, score or mark as part of a formal report. Here are the references of my report. Before I will end my report, here is the quote of Paul Black, one of the authors of Assessment in Classroom Learning. When the cook tastes the soup, that's formative assessment. When the customer tastes the soup, that's summative assessment. This is Danilo Davidina reporting. Signing out.